Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bishara joins us here in the studio. And Marwan, it seems as though there is perhaps some confusion over what might happen next in Rafah because the aerial bombardment, the attacks on the territory have continued, and actually they've been intensifying. Really worrying reports about more than 100,000 people fleeing, people who've already been displaced from other parts of Gaza. And now it seems maybe a little confusion or contentiousness over where Washington stands on this and whether or not they have done anything to restrain Israel's actions in Rafah.
But, you know, it's sort of symptomatic of what we've seen the past 7 months. The United States expresses its hesitation, its reluctance, its cautiousness, say, about a land invasion. Netanyahu says, we will do it. After several weeks, they do it, and the Americans follow in Israel's footsteps. Over the last few weeks, the United States has been saying no invasion of Rafah. Now they're saying no full invasion of Rafah, complete invasion of Rafah. So Netanyahu says, well, we'll do a limited invasion of Rafah, which probably will take us to a full invasion of Rafah. Because to my mind, whether there are talks in Cairo, Doha, or elsewhere, to my mind, Netanyahu and his generals and his fanatics of our ministers are determined to go into Rafah, or much of Rafah, or to attack Hamas and Hamas's tunnels and Hamas's fighters and activists in Rafah, even if that means heavy human cost. I think they expect the United States eventually to follow in their footsteps.
And this idea that Washington has pressured Israel in some way to hold off on a sort of ground invasion, I mean, does that make sense to you when really, in explicit terms, Washington has sort of said, well, even they didn't like the options that were presented to them by Israel, and then they sort of seem to say that even if an invasion were to go ahead, they need to come up with a plan for civilians. So in that sense, it seems Israel may not have been given the green light, but we know that they will be supported with everything they need, certainly militarily, if this is to go ahead.
So this is the thing. It's a bit, clever, as it were, on the part of the United States, saying that, well, we are withholding some of the ammunitions that they were supposed to send to Israel. But since the aid was approved by Congress, multiple shipments have already left to Israel. So in fact, Netanyahu says we will fight with our, I don't know what, nails and so on and so forth. It's all such humbug, because we all know that the American weapons have already left to Israel. And Israel will have all the weapon it needs until the end of times from the United States and from U.S. stockpiles in Israel and so on and so forth. So I think there's no worry about that. But the Biden administration continuously gives the impression that it's reluctant and that it is not 100% on board, because I think it's also careful that one day it will bear the brunt of the judgment both of history and perhaps the International Court of Justice, or the International Criminal Court, I should say, because they are complicit in the war in Gaza. So if they can take a bit of a distance, while at the same time ensuring that Israel does what Israel wants, why not? Just
a brief one, Marwan. There's a very important vote today at the UN General Assembly. Tell us about that.
Well, we already have some 140 countries recognize the state of Palestine. It's good that there's some mention that it is going to be on the basis of 1967 borders, meaning that territory. I think clearly, just on the basis of what you were saying earlier on Rafah and what we're saying later on about Palestine, something incredibly important is happening in the world today. Israel is getting a beating around the world, while Palestine is getting a beating in the Middle East. So while Israel is really cracking down hard, war crimes, slaughter, and so on and so forth in Palestine, while Palestine is losing as the homeland, but Palestine, the cause, whether it's at the United Nations or Western capitals or university campuses, is certainly gaining ground.
We'll certainly have coverage of that significant vote at the UN General Assembly a bit later on. Marwan, for now, thank you. And actually,
make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.